All right. Well, hello everyone. Regular folks here. Welcome to the Kubernetes SIG IBMCloud meeting today on August 15th, 2018. My name is Sadhu Zala. I'm a SIG co-lead and your meeting host today. Please keep in mind that this is a public meeting and it's being recorded, and recording will be made available on the YouTube. I have put the agenda link in the chat, and there's another link for the SIG charter review as well. So we have a couple items in the agenda today. We can start with we're actually going reverse order with the second item first, to review the SIG charter and finalize it, and then we will have a Richard, another co-lead for the SIG, briefing everyone about the the recent support, release support for Kubernetes 1.11.2 that was announced yesterday. So we'll have that next after the SIG charter review. So I put the link, but I think maybe it's a good idea that I start sharing my screen, and we just go over the charter document. Right here. So I have created this, a commit which is still in my GitHub repo. I noticed one thing just a few minutes back as I was doing the timing, but just to go over, I think I will show the Zoom link in the middle of my things. But here is what it looks like in more readable way. I think I can go over line by line, just quickly, section by section, and if you have anything, bring it up, or you can just comment on the GitHub commit link, which I have it in the it's in the meeting notes and in the chat. So overall, it's going to be not a big document, which is good. I think people like smaller charter, smaller documents. We try to adopt lots of things which is already defined in the Kubernetes governance GitHub repo page, instead of adding our own stuff. So not to worry about too much of maintenance and making it actually simpler. So the first line is pretty standard, which it seems like standard for all the SIGs. We are just saying that we will adhere to the charter README file, and would you like everyone to share me all the links, or I can just go ahead and you would like to see the sublinks, or not really?
I think it's okay.
It's okay. Okay. Yep. So we're just going with the as it described, and the roles and organization management, which is also outlining the SIG governance page. Scope, we have a pretty brief scope statement there, basically stating that our SIG is the activities in the SIGs are around Kubernetes integration with IBM public and private clouds. And we also have discussions around CNCF projects, which are related to Kubernetes. And again, there's a link for SIG README, which is for our SIG, IBM Cloud SIG, defining the greater source of information, which is already out there. There is an in-scope statement in the template out there, but I feel maybe just out of scope is good enough, because what we have described in the scope statement pretty much covers what we have a coverage for this SIG. Out of scope, I just or actually we already have little discussions between SIG leads and Doug. So this is just saying that the SIG is not for discussion on any commercial aspects of any of the IBM clouds. And role and organization management, it's similar to what I just mentioned in the earlier of this briefing, is we will adhere to the SIG governance. So that I can just quickly actually show, just to make it clear to everyone that the roles defined there are 3-4 different roles, SIG chairs, and then they also have member roles. Something actually I had a little discussion with Doug a couple days back is a tech lead roles, and if there are sub projects, then sub project owner role out there. So member here are member to one of these different groups, or teams, like a team for chairs or other tech lead teams with multiple tech leads or sub project owners. So SIG, the chair is pretty simple description out there. Just running and operating the SIG, typically 2 to 3 members or chairs, members of this group. And it's tracked in the SIG YAML. So we also have a link for the SIG YAML in our charter. I'll show you in a minute. And then there's other discussion for the different roles. Now, we don't have all this role for our SIG. We may in the future, with any code repos and things we will add, and that time we will modify the charter with the new PR. But right now, all we're saying is we are adhering to the SIG governance description, except that we only have a role for the chair, and that's it. We're not having those other roles. And this organization management, this is again pretty standard. There are links for the SIG meeting timing, meeting list, recording of the calls, and other things. The one thing I noticed is not PST, it's EST, so that's something I need to make change myself. But that's pretty much it. Just a quick walkthrough. Anyone has any comments, suggestion? Like I said, feel free to put your comments in the commit, or we can discuss here. And I can well, Doug is already taking notes. I can take a note as well and make those changes. But if it looks good, I think we can, or with modification, we can try to submit it tomorrow, today, or sometime this week. So open for comments.
Yeah, it looks reasonable to me. I mean, it's very lightweight, I guess, which is good. Is there any difference between our charter and other cloud providers?
Yeah, no, not really. Except that some of the other cloud provider charter has they have a bigger SIG in that they have a cloud provider code repo, like some sub projects.
Okay.
Like AWS, for example, I think they have like already planned 5 different sub projects for the different touching different aspects of Kubernetes with their own code. In that case, they have a little bit bigger, charter. If they have a sort of deviation from the SIG governance defined roles, right? But there are SIGs charter I've seen. It's pretty straightforward, and I can actually show others if you want to. But and some of the other SIGs which are not cloud provider, they have again.
Yeah, I was thinking more of the cloud providers.
Yeah. No, the other thing, some other cloud provider is again in scope statement, like right before the out of scope, listing certain activities that like implicitly in scope. I didn't find it necessary considering the scope statement out there and covering what is out of scope. But I don't see any other big differences.
Okay.
Thanks, Khalid. Doug, you had some comments, or no?
No, I actually I did leave 1 or 2 comments in the thing itself, but they're more just typographical. We don't have to go over them.
Okay. Yep. Perfect. Yep. And Richard, I know you did review it earlier, and I know you sent emails. But any other comments we can take care of it. Well, if Nimesh, Wei, anyone else, any comments?
No, I don't have comments.
Okay, cool. Cool. Thanks. Thanks, everyone. So yeah, I mean, this commit, I will create a PR, and if you have any comments from reviewers, we will address it. And if you need to modify, in any ways, we'll modify it, or otherwise we have it out there, and then this is more like an living doc, right? It can change a little bit, but again. Any changes in the SIG activities. So that sounds pretty good. Thank you. The next thing we have is, I don't need to stop my screen, so I'm gonna stop it. Next thing we have in the agenda is, I think, unless anyone added anything else, I think Richard. It's just Sunny, go to you. It'd be great to hear your overview on this new Cube support in IKS.
Definitely. Let me get my screen shared here. Okay. So yeah, definitely excited to share and talk about Kubernetes 1.11 release that we just made available worldwide yesterday in our Kubernetes service. So what I want to do is just give you a brief overview of the release and some of the features and functions that we have and that we've changed, and those that the community has provided. So when you go and log in and attempt to create a cluster, right now you'll see the new option here for Kubernetes 1.11.2. And our default cluster version continues to be Kube 1.10. You can obviously create a 1.11 cluster or upgrade an existing cluster to a 1.11 if you so choose. So at this point, there's 4 Kube releases, as you see here, 1.8, 9, and 10, and 11 now. And eventually, we will be deprecating and making 1.8 unsupported. So for those folks still hanging out at 1.8, they need to move forward, just like they did when we unsupported or deprecated and unsupported 1.5 and 1.7. So that is the simple view that you see now, as far as what it looks like just by adding Kubernetes 1.11. Not too exciting there. So if you have an existing cluster, and I'm going to go ahead and check one of mine. I have some clusters here in, I think, US East here that are at older versions. So, and it's just as an FYI, I think I mentioned this before in a previous demo, is that when we provide an update notification to existing clusters, we do that based upon the default version that we provide. So you can see my 1.8 and 9 clusters have an update notification. That would take me to 1.10 is what the notification is for. For 1.10 clusters, you still can choose to update that to 1.11 if you'd like. So that's option is available. So let's talk 1.11 here. I do have a cluster here at 1.11 over in the UK, and I've logged into it right now. And I do want to take, before I go into a demo of some of the features in 1.11, I want to take you to our version changelog, which describes not only the Kubernetes stuff at a high level, but also some of the changes within the Kubernetes service, from IBM here. So the biggest thing that you'll note is that we now use Containerd as our container runtime for Kubernetes. We've switched from Docker. And so with that, those applications relying on Docker, which there are some, would have to make modifications before you choose to upgrade to 1.11. And that was our choice to go with Containerd versus Docker on the runtime. There's also along with our changelog, there's also a section for migration actions, and we talk about that transition as well. So that's one of the big items here. A few minor updates to some of the components, such as etcd, our file storage plugin, Heapster, and so on. And obviously, if you want to look at the details on Kubernetes itself, you can go to release notes on Kube. They'll give you all the cool functions that are in there, as well as migration actions. From our standpoint, we did enable the priority admission controller. So you can do priority classes and preemption support, and I'll talk about that and actually demo that. And then for integration with the IBM Cloud Access Management, or IAM, we now support the IAM access groups in our API server, in the Kube API server, so that when you are running a 111 cluster, you can integrate those with RBAC to take advantage of that support. So. And with all of this, on the migration actions, obviously, if you're creating a new cluster, it's not as big of a deal. But if you're doing an upgrade, we do have the migrations actions in place. And a lot of these are highlights from our experiences of moving to 111, and based upon what the community has provided in their list of migration actions. So we try to pull those out as key features that you want to be aware of, and changes that have been made. Not only on our end, so like our end would be like the containerd transition, but also on the Kubernetes end, where like you can see like they changed certain CLIs to perform different on exit codes for certain situations, right? So you want to be aware of those. Yeah, so I have a few other things. So on the, here we go. Let me move that out of the way. So on containerd, there is a cool blog on Kubernetes IO blog that will discuss containerd and a pretty decent overview of it, and why the transition from Docker to containerd, some of the reasons that you can see why we chose to do this. So that's information is out there on explaining that, and also on the RBAC transition I mentioned with the IAM access groups. It's also in our doc. And then pod priority and preemption. We do have a write-up on that and how we're using it, and some of the configurations that we're making, and on top of what Kubernetes is providing. So let's go over that. And then also I want to mention the syscontrol features now in Kubernetes. So I am logged into my 111 cluster here, and now in Kubernetes 111, there is this cool feature for setting syscontrols on your pods. It was an alpha feature. It was enabled via annotations, and now you can do it in the pod spec. And this is the kube doc for that. And then if you go and actually do it on one of our on the 111 cluster here, you'll see I have a couple pods deployed in my default namespace, and one uses an unsafe syscontrol as defined by what Kubernetes determines as unsafe, and then also a safe syscontrol. And the unsafe ones, we do not allow in our deployments by default. So that unsafe syscontrol pod is been forbidden from being deployed, and the safe one is allowed. So if you check out the YAML for the pods, and in the pod spec, you can now see in the security context the syscontrol settings that you used to have to put in annotations. Now you can provide in the pod spec. Questions on that before I jump over to the pod priority and preemption?
Well, yeah, I think I missed something. So how do you, the unsafe one, how do we determine it? You said it's mentioned in the, oh, I think I missed that part, so sorry.
Sure, no problem. So how you determine it, so yeah, in the Kubernetes documentation, okay, they will explain what is defined as how they determine syscontrols and how they group them into safe and unsafe. So I would defer you to the doc for the details on that.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. Okay, perfect.
Yep.
That helps you. Thanks.
So we did not enable unsafe syscontrols in our deployment, so which is a kubelet option to allow unsafe syscontrols, and you can specify which ones you were to allow. Now, obviously, a privilege, like if you go and deploy privileged pods and try to do other things, you can bypass things, but just by default, unsafe or not allowed.
Okay, thanks.
So So that's one of the features I know some of our users have been trying to work around. That is the syscontrol options to be able to configure on their pods. So the other one is pod priority, which is a new feature in Kubernetes 1.11. It was alpha state, now it's in beta, and you can use pod priorities to configure, which pod has a higher priority than another pod such that if your system starts to reach capacity, help the scheduler to determine what pod should I allow in and which pod should I evict, and so on, right? So I've got a couple deployments here. You can see medium and low. The pods running low have a priority of 0, which is the lowest priority. And that, in fact, is the default priority you get for a pod. If you have no priority classes, if you don't have a global default set, and that's what you get. My medium priority class, or the medium pod here, if I check the YAML for it, you'll see in there, just gotta go and find it, the priority class name and the actual priority. So Kubernetes allows you to define your own priority classes with a priority value of 0 up to, I believe, 1 billion. This is a class that we've provided with our IBM Cloud Kubernetes service that you can say these are application critical pods, and it's a priority of 900 million. This is all relative on the priority spectrum, right? But it gives you a starting point. We use this for our load balancer pods to keep them as critical. There are 2 higher priority classes defined by default. They are defined by Kubernetes, and they are reserved for pods running in the kube system namespace, and basically help you keep your cluster alive, so to speak. So I'll talk about those in a moment, but before I do that, I want to give you the demo now on what it looks like here. If I go ahead and scale up my low priority pods, or my deployment to 4 pods, my cluster does not have capacity to handle all of the request, CPU request size of these pods. I made them ridiculously high, thus to demo this. But you can see here that when I do the deployment and the scale up, I was only able to run 2 of the 4 pods. Okay, so now you can see I have 1 medium pod and 2 low priority pods. 2 of them are sitting in pending state because there's insufficient CPU. Okay, and this is all fine because now that we've reached capacity, though, I want to go ahead and scale up my medium deployment to have 2 pods and see what the system does here. So what you should see Kube doing is realizing that it doesn't have capacity for the medium priority pod. And as you see in the message here, it's insufficient. So it was unable to schedule it. But then you see this, one of my low priority pods are being terminated, effectively evicted. So Kube is saying, look, I've got a higher priority pod coming in. I need to make room for it. So this low priority pod needs to go. And so you'll see once I refresh here, that medium priority pod is going to get scheduled, and the lower priority one will have been evicted. So yeah, so that indeed that's the case. So now I have 2 pods running in medium priority, only 1 at the low, and then the other one was evicted. And obviously I do the same thing, scale up one more time, I'd get the same results. I go to 3, I'm going to get that other low one evicted. So, and then just for completeness here, I'm going to jump over while that should be scheduled here. And I want to go to the kube system namespace, because this is really where it really is critical, that once your system starts to reach capacity, obviously you want the most critical pods running. Everything else that you can deem lower priority, that can be determined by you as an administrator up front, so that when kube comes time to schedule, it can evict things that it believes that you determined are lower priority. So in the kube system namespace, as I mentioned, there's a the ability to set a priority class that's controlled by Kubernetes. And so if I go ahead, and I got to find that here. Oh, I'm looking at the, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong thing. I got to look at the pod. So I'm going to look at the pod here of, say, Kubernetes pod. And I look at the priority of that one. Yeah, here we go. So the Kubernetes pod is one good example of what's considered system critical. And so you can set the priority class to system cluster critical. Another option is system node critical. That's primarily tailored towards daemon sets. And the priority here is 2 billion. And then the other one is slightly higher on system node critical. But bottom line, these two priority classes are given to you by Kubernetes. They're there by default. You can't create anything higher than them as an administrator. You can't delete these, and they're reserved for things in kube system namespace. So that way you can protect your cluster from runaway pods.
So what's the relationship between the priority classes? Because you mentioned these two being super critical. When you define new priority classes, is there a mechanism in there to tell Kubernetes the order in which these priority classes take precedence, or is it strictly the priority number that matters?
The priority number that matters. Yep.
Interesting.
Yep. So that priority number is the key to determine who gets the highest priority and what the scheduler will do. So that's why they reserve the 2 billion and up for Kubernetes system critical ones.
So does that mean that technically if you were to lower this number away from 2 billion down to 5, you would suddenly be moving the DNS thing into a spot where it actually could get killed off?
You could, but you can't change the system cluster critical priority class.
So I'm confused though. What does the name have to do with it if it's really the priority number that matters?
The two priority classes named such as system cluster critical, system node critical are created and protected by Kubernetes. So you can't edit those or modify those in any way, nor can you create your own priority class that has a priority above 1 billion.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Are users allowed to create their own priority classes?
You'd have to be the cluster administrator to create the priority classes. I believe that restriction is in place. But then, as the user, once they're available, then you could so choose to use a certain set of priority classes. And I know there's a feature in somewhere, I have to look at like on the pod security policy that they're looking at allowing you to control like what priority classes somebody could select for their pods, right? Yeah.
And some comments on the priority class. So basically, if the paths are best efforts paths, means the requests and limits are 0, the default scheduler, the Kubernetes default scheduler are not going to preempt those paths because those paths doesn't have any contribution to lower the usage. The usage is quoted. I mean, in scheduler perspective, how scheduler looks at the system. So yeah, so make sure you use request and limits so that default scheduler know how to preempt the proper paths. Yeah.
Yeah, right. And that's exactly how I deployed for this demo. I did set on in both of these, I set a request of the CPU so that the scheduler was able to determine what my request was relative between these two. So I was able to force insufficient CPU. But yeah, that applies. So the scheduler decisions not only come into play, obviously, when I'm making requests that the system can't contain on that node, but also like any situations where it needs to evict pods, say, or even you're reaching the limit of number of pods kube allows on a node, right? Which is pretty high, but certainly.
Yeah. So the other, just a quick question there. So schedule for a lot of things like request limits or affinity, anti-affinity rules, right? It's there's a thing called, oh, there's a long name, but it these rules are taken or considered by a scheduler when it's scheduling it, right? So with this priority, if low priority pods are already been scheduled, and then later if there are higher priorities, medium priorities pods are in the pending list, would it kill the low priority one and
Yes.
schedule the, it will, or okay?
Yeah, that's what you saw here in this example. I've scaled up right now this medium priority deployment to 3 pods. It was at 1. And through that scale up, I didn't do anything to the low one. You see that it wants 4 replicas, but it has 0. And the reason it has 0 is because number 1, there's insufficient CPU for all 4 on my kubelets or on my nodes, but also because this medium one came in and preempted the lower one. And so Kube evicted all of the ones that were scheduled.
Okay, I thought the low one was in the pending and it just say, hey, no, we have a higher priority. But even it's scheduled, that's what, okay, it does. That's good, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you take away the medium ones, the low priority one will come back up, I assume, right?
Indeed. Yeah. So if I did scale that down back to 1, that should kill 2 of the medium priority pods due to my request then scheduling. And it will make room for the lower priority ones here. So I'll just refresh my screen. Hopefully that indeed will show itself here.
These priority classes are global across namespaces?
Yes.
The idea, okay.
Right.
And
so, yeah, we have a doc write-up on our end on it, and it references, and I believe I have it here. Yeah, so the Kube doc on pod priority and preemption would also be a good place for that, for additional information. They've had the feature available since Kube 1.8 and alpha, and they just went to beta on 1.11. But yeah, if I go back here now, you can see I scaled down the medium one to 1 pod, and that made room for a couple of those low priority pods to come in.
I had someone not complaining, but showing his view this morning that, yeah, this seems like useful, but it's adding complexities. At least that's how he thought, the priority thing.
Right, for sure. I mean, there's a trade-off there because beforehand you didn't have that type of eviction capability, so that once you reach capacity, what is Kube supposed to do? What is your choice for what should run or not run, right? So it would potentially evict the things that you didn't want it to evict.
Yeah.
Or for things that you didn't want it to. So
sure. No, thanks.
That's all I had on the Kube 1.11 front. There's certainly some more information on some of the things we're doing in our doc. And do you guys have any other questions for me, or anything else you'd like to see?
Well, I have not related to 1.11. I mean, I only had a question yesterday when I was looking that I know you mentioned in the past 3 release support, right? And you already covered that the 1.8 will be dropped soon because of 1.11. So that covered the question. I got a little not related question, but since you and Khalid both are on the call, just I was playing yesterday night with the client, the CLI for the IBM Cloud, right? IKS and ICP, the separate plugin. I think I just read that right now we have like a BX and IBM Cloud. Both are, one will be sort of.
I think we're moving to cloud control.
Cloud, okay. So the BX will go away, kind of.
Yeah, I believe so. In the next version of ICP, I think I've seen discussions about moving to cloud control. I think that's the one that the IKS uses now, right?
Yeah, the like the BX commands.
Yeah, but now we have a new command, right? So IBM.
Yeah, you can use BXCS or IBM Cloud KS, IBM Cloud Kubernetes Service. It's just basically an alias, command alias between the two.
Okay. Like Khalid said, the BX will go away. I'm pretty sure. But yeah.
I think it's just a rebranding.
But yeah.
Same functionality.
Which makes sense, right? No more blue mix. So, no, that was it. Thank you so much. I don't have any other question, but yeah. Anyone else? Well, if don't have any more question, I guess that was pretty much in the agenda. I know Doug has covered all the minutes. Only thing, Richard, can you please provide the link to the blog post you mentioned earlier? I think that'll be good. Or if you
Definitely, yeah, I can put that in there. Would you like it in the chat, or would you like it?
No, in the agenda, in the meeting notes, that would be great.
For sure. Yeah.
I would like to read myself too, and I'm sure others will. Well, all right. So I guess that was a very good overview walkthrough. Richard, thank you so much. If we don't have any other questions, no discussion for today, because we're already over 30 minutes, and we can have this as a call and meet in next 2 weeks. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining, and have a nice rest of the day. Yep. Alrighty. Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks again.
Yep. Thank you.